Nottingham Forest have been docked 4 points for breaching Premier League profit and sustainability rules, and that means they've replaced Luton in the relegation zone, although the punishment is subject to appeal. Now, Everton were deducted 10 points earlier this season, which was later reduced to 6 on appeal. Right, let's go to Anton Tolui, who's at the City Ground for us. Anton, I gather you have Forest's response. Tell us.
Yeah, we do. Nottingham Forest have issued their first response since obviously this decision to dock them 4 points for breaking the profit and sustainability rules. Just a little bit of context around that, Mike, because obviously Nottingham Forest were found to have overspent by £34.5 million. That's described as a significant breach. Now, the way the rules work were, obviously that's an instant 3-point deduction if you breach the rules. A significant breach means it's 6 points, but then because Nottingham Forest cooperated with the Premier League, that was reduced to 4 points. Now, that's all important because of Nottingham Forest's response, which we just got in the last few seconds. So excuse me while I look down a bit, I'll be reading it verbatim, but here we go. Nottingham Forest is extremely disappointed with the decision of the Commission to impose a sanction on the club of 4 points to be applied with immediate effect. Now, they go on to thank the Premier League Commission for saying, look, thank you very much for dealing with this in an expedited manner, but they do say we are extremely dismayed by the tone and content of the Premier League submissions before the Commission. Now, they're unhappy about the fact that obviously, look, the Premier League wasn't particularly happy with Nottingham Forest's business plan, the way they're looking at the profit and sustainability rules, because Nottingham Forest, in their mitigation, said, look, we came up into the Premier League in a way that wasn't really expected. Remember, Nottingham Forest came into the Premier League on the back of winning 10 out of their last 14 games in the Championship to go on a run that got them into the playoffs and then winning the playoffs to come up there. A lot of players out of contract, a lot of players on loan. They felt they needed to rebuild for a team that could compete in the Premier League. They go on to say in their statement that the Premier League sought a sanction of 8 points as a starting point and was utterly disproportionate when compared to the 9 points that their own rules prescribed for insolvency. We're also surprised that the Premier League gave no consideration at all to the unique circumstances and the club and its mitigation, as I was saying there. They also go on to talk about the situation around Brennan Johnson. Obviously, now Brennan Johnson's transfer was exceptionally complicated and a little bit controversial as well, because we know, and it's come out in these written reasons, that Brentford had an offer on the table of around £32 million from Brentford during the sort of financial period, which would have added to Nottingham Forest's profit sustainability, sort of would have made up for it basically, or nearly made up for their losses. But obviously they wanted to keep him and sell him for as much as they could, sold him on deadline day for £12.5 million more. So that's another criticism that the club makes in their response, saying that the Commission decision raises issues of concern for all aspirant clubs. A player transfer market is highly specialised and trading environment that cannot be compared to the sale of normal products and services. There will be occasions when a player transfer cannot be completed in the first half of a transfer window and can only be completed in the second half of that window. This should not be a reason for a condemnation of the club. So yeah, you can see Nottingham Forest not particularly happy with some of the Premier League regulations and some of the things they've been found guilty of. They go on to wrap up saying, we believe the high levels of cooperation the club has shown during this process, and which were confirmed and recorded in the Commission's decisions, were not reciprocated by the Premier League. So Nottingham Forest not entirely happy by the fact that they have been deducted 4 points, not entirely happy with the fact that obviously they feel their mitigation wasn't fully taken into consideration by the Premier League when their decision was made. And obviously they are unhappy by the fact that they are now in the relegation places, facing a survival dogfight between now and the end of the season. One thing they don't talk about in their statement is a potential appeal. Nottingham Forest have 7 days to decide whether they want to appeal, to put their appeal in writing to the Premier League. No word yet as to whether Nottingham Forest will appeal.
Anton, for the moment, thank you very much. So, no appeal as yet. We'll wait to see. Anton Tolui at the City Ground for us. Right, our chief reporter, Kaveh Solhekol, is here. Kaveh, 4 points, not 6 like Everton. Why?
I mean, the reason you're asking that question is because Nottingham Forest went over the limit by £34.5 million, and they were hit with a 4-point deduction, whereas Everton went over it by £19.5 million, so much less. But they got a 6-point deduction. 2 extra points were taken off them. So what is going on? Well, I think what is going on, we have to read the written reasons of the commission that were provided to us today. 50-page long document. And inside that document, it says in actual fact, the Premier League originally wanted Forest to be hit with an 8-point deduction because they thought Forest's breach was more serious than Everton's. But they said that Forest should get 2 points taken off that reduction because they'd cooperated with the commission and the whole case, and so they should get a 6-point deduction. So that is what the Premier League were asking for. But the commission decided no, they went a different route, and they said 4 points. And we got detail about how they got to 4 points. You just saw it there. First of all, they said, you've admitted a breach, that's 3 points. The breach was serious, that's another 3 points, so that's got us up to 6. But you cooperated fully and you admitted the breach at the first possible opportunity, so we're going to give you 2 points off for that. So 6 minus 2 is 4. That's how they got to 4 points.
All right, I get it. So they admitted the breach, but they said there were mitigating circumstances. What were they?
Well, broadly speaking, there were 6 mitigating circumstances. The first one, Forest argued, was, look, we came up through the playoffs. We, unlike the other 2 clubs we came up with, Bournemouth and Fulham, we had never had parachute payments. So basically, we were in a race against time to assemble a squad that was good enough to stay in the Premier League. That is why we went out and spent something like £150 million on 22 players. They say that should be taken into consideration. Other things they said we did not get any sporting advantage from overspending. Basically, we just did it so that we could be a competitive club in the Premier League. They also said that the whole issue of Player A is, I think, Brennan Johnson, everyone accepts. They could have sold him for something like £30 million before the accounting deadline of the 30th of June, and everything would have been fine and they wouldn't have been in breach of these rules. But they didn't want to sell someone like Brennan Johnson on the cheap. So they refused to sell him for £30 million. They waited until deadline day 2 months later and they sold him for £47.5 million. So they got an extra £17.5 million. And that meant that they couldn't bank the money they got from him in their accounts because it was after the January 30th deadline. So there are lots of mitigating factors, but basically the panel said we don't really accept the majority of these arguments, but they do accept the fact that Nottingham Forest cooperated, and that's why they decided not to hit them with 6 points, but 4 points instead.
All right, Everton. Charged again on the same day as Forest. Why haven't we heard about their potential punishment?
Well, they were charged for the second time. They've already been charged once.
Yep.
They ended up getting a 6-point deduction. There will now be a new 3-person panel who will hear Everton's second charge. Now, the Premier League never give any information about when these hearings are. That is totally confidential. But my understanding is that the Nottingham Forest case was going to be dealt with first, and then we were going to have the second Everton case dealt with. So it's very likely that the Everton hearing is going to be this week or next week, and we should know the decision from that independent panel probably in the next 2 or 3 weeks.
But there's obviously the option to appeal. The last time they appealed, it took forever. So does that mean there's a possibility we'll come to the end of the season and relegation won't be sorted?
Well, if you look at the rules as they stand, relegation may not be sorted on the last
ridiculous.
On the last day of the season. Those are the rules as they stand. But I sense from the Premier League there is a real impetus to get these cases dealt with as quickly as possible. For instance, in the Nottingham Forest case, the hearing, 2-day hearing, was 11 days ago. And 11 days later, we've got the decision. Now it's up to Forest 7 days to decide whether they want to appeal. I think if we stick to the same time frame for Everton's second charge, then it looks like this will be sorted by the final day of the season. But you're totally right with the question you ask. There is still the possibility that if these cases drag on, we could get to the state where on the last day of the season, we don't know who is staying up and who's being relegated.
So if that's the case, are these profit and sustainability rules fit for purpose?
I think there's now a real feeling within football and within the Premier League that they are not fit for purpose. Everybody accepts that there should be some kind of financial fair play rules, but these rules as they stand have proved to be very controversial. We've seen they've caused lots of problems this season, and I think there's a general acceptance that they are going to be replaced as early as this summer. I don't think financial fair play rules are going to go away at all, but I think we could have a new system, a new regime coming in pretty soon.
OK, all right, we had an early look at this, so let's talk about this because everyone's talking about it. What about Manchester City? What about Chelsea?
As far as Manchester City are concerned, everybody knows they're facing, 115 charges. This is a very serious case. Manchester City deny completely that they have done anything wrong. But I think you shouldn't be comparing Manchester City to what is happening with Everton and what is happening with Nottingham Forest. Because what's happening with Everton and what's happening with Nottingham Forest are PSR rules, and they're timetables of when you have to submit your accounts, and the rules are very clear. And they're rules that have come into the rule book recently, and there's been a real drive to get these cases sorted out in season. Manchester City case is historical. It goes back something like 12 seasons, I think. So it is a far more complex issue, and it's not just about PSR. As far as Chelsea are concerned, they haven't been charged. The Premier League are investigating a few issues that came up when Roman Abramovich was forced to sell Chelsea. The new Chelsea owners noticed some discrepancies in the books related to payments that were made which could be connected to transfers, and that is what the Premier League are investigating. So I don't think it's fair to compare Everton and Forest with what's happening to Manchester City and what potentially could happen to Chelsea. But I totally understand why people are saying, what is going on? Why Everton and Nottingham Forest being dealt with so quickly when these cases seem to be dragging on?
OK, so that's for another time. Kaveh, thank you very much. Let's go back to Anton then. Let's talk Forest, because it's very real for them. 4 points deduction means they're in the relegation zone, Anton. 9 games left to play. Are they all of a sudden one of the favourites to go down?
I mean, it doesn't look good for Nottingham Forest, does it? Look, today, as we've been saying, the club is exceptionally frustrated, but 2024 in general has been a year of frustration on the field for Nottingham Forest. Just think about this month alone. A 98th minute defeat here at the City Ground to Liverpool. Then they lost to Brighton by a single goal in a game where a VAR decision went against them when they felt that Yakamoto should have got sent off and Brighton down to 10 men. And then obviously an 89th minute equaliser at Kenilworth Road against Luton, who are now above them in the Premier League after today's decision. Look, Nottingham Forest have only won 1 of their 9 Premier League games so far this calendar year. They've lost 6 of them. They've been on a slide as it is anyway. But look, we've all been talking about Nottingham Forest and obviously subsequently talking about Everton. And the word that was used around Everton, wasn't it, was galvanising them after their points deduction, initial 10-point deduction back in November. They lost to Manchester United, but then went on a 4-game winning run in the Premier League. And Nottingham Forest will be absolutely desperate for something very, very similar indeed to stop the rot that's been setting in this season. And when you look at the remaining games, 9 games they've got, like you said, Mike, between now and the end of this season, my word, they've got 2 huge games coming up here at this City Ground when the Premier League resumes. They've got 78.5 hours that could shape their season, because they've got Crystal Palace and then they've got Fulham here in a matter of days. And when you look at the next 9 games, only 3 of their games, Nottingham Forest, are against teams in the top half. That's actually 3 in the next 6 games, those as well. They play Manchester City as the end of that run. They take on Tottenham and they take on Wolves as well. So they've already played Liverpool twice. They've already played Arsenal twice, Aston Villa twice. So they've got rid of some of the biggest teams in the Premier League already this season. 2 of the last 3 games of the season are against Sheffield United and Burnley as well. So you never know how much they'll be playing for come that time of the season as well. So yeah, there's a lot to play for here at Nottingham Forest, but they're really hoping that this somehow stimulates the team to be doing a lot better than they have been.
Tom to Louis, live from the City Ground. Thank you.